Pastor Roy Gerhart from Galloway United Methodist Church in Franklin, Pennsylvania, sharing a few words of encouragement to help us follow after Jesus. Well, if you've been following along with the story of Samson with me this week, you may have been waiting for the good man to emerge in Samson and may be confused because you're not seeing that really happen. The story of Samson is one that is kind of perplexing because we expect someone who is remembered as a servant of God to have some kind of redeeming qualities. We want to see good character and godliness in their lives, and we don't really get to see that emerge with Samson. This is a man who has been impulsive. He's been consumed with his own self-interest, short-sighted, often explosive, and uncontrollable. And yet, God is employed him as an instrument in his greater plan. To understand this, we've got to actually recognize even the context in which Samson is living. This is a wild time, filled with violence. The Philistines are not nice neighbors. They're not people that the Israelites have attacked and made their enemies. At this moment, what's happened is that the Philistines come as the invaders, and this time it's they who are attacking the Israelites, and they have the upper hand. And they are not nice people. They're not even nice to each other. Remember that when Samson married a woman from the Philistines, he went down to Timnah. He was set up with an entourage by the Philistines. And Samson made a bet with these guys that they couldn't solve a riddle that he posed to them. And rather than fail and have to pay up to Samson, they threatened his bride and her family. They threatened to burn them if she did not get the answer from Samson. And you've got to remember that later on, when there were further conflicts and further issues in this matter, and Samson reaped revenge upon the Philistines, that they came back and burned this woman and her family. They did it because they couldn't get at Samson, and so even though they had nothing to do with what Samson had done, they came and attacked them. This is the context in which Samson is now battling with this enemy. And so that we need to recognize that. And that when we still continue to look for Samson to emerge as this iconic figure of godliness, we're still going to be disappointed. I mean, even at the end of Samson's life, when he is seeking redemption with God, the Philistines have in their cruelty gouged out his eyes in an effort to subdue and control him. And when Samson sought God's redemption, asking him to return to him his strength one last time, he doesn't ask that this would be a great victory for the nation of Israel, that he could free his people. No, Samson is still this short-sighted, self-consumed person whose only real interest is, give me vengeance on them for my 2 eyes. And so when we look at Samson, we see a man who would ordinarily be forgettable, a person who is self-consumed and caught up in personal vendetta throughout his life is certainly forgettable. What makes him memorable is how God employed him to battle against the Philistines. Because in the larger landscape of God's purpose, God uses Samson's combatancy with the Philistines to begin to break their grip on the people of Israel, to begin to set the people of Israel free. Because you have to remember this, what we're seeing in Samson is not a glorious man. What we are seeing is a glorious God who can engage this man in battle to win for his people despite himself. And what we're seeing is God continuing to work out his promise. It began with a single man that God could call out who would follow him. And God promised Abraham that he would give him descendants, and that he would create of them a nation, and this nation would bear a testimony of God in this world that would produce a Savior, that God would bless the whole world through them. And God is in this process of carving out a nation in this wild world filled with violence and sin. And he is battling to carve out this nation because he is fixed on his promise that he will produce a nation who will have a testimony that will bring to the world a Savior. And his mission continues in you and me because we now have the gospel, this good news of a Savior that God has battled to bring to the world. And it's now our occupation to pass on this good news and introduce the world to Jesus. May God bless you today, and as you share his good news, may God make you a blessing wherever he takes you.